Okay. Okay, everybody. Hello. My name is John Munno. I am a wedding photographer and the owner of John Munno Wedding Photography. It is got a special video today for you. The video is why does hiring a photographer cost so much? And this is a question I hear a lot, and it's a question I see a lot in group discussions, and a lot of couples are wondering how much does it cost and why does it cost and all these things. So I thought I would put together a little behind the scene video to help you understand the costs of hiring a wedding photographer and helping understand why. So the main thing is, as you start planning your wedding, I know most of you haven't done this before, so you get engaged and all of a sudden the whole thing of a wedding comes up, and then you have to go to work to find the venues and find dresses and photographers and all these things, and you start to put all the dollars together and you're like, oh my gosh, I never realized how much it cost. And the other problem that sometimes happen is that people have in their minds what I call is an idealistic budget. So they kind of like have in their minds, I'm going to have a wedding and this is how much it's going to cost. So it's idealistic because they say, oh, my wedding budget, photography budget is $1,000. And it's often not, it's idealistic, but it's not realistic. And if you look at the cost of hiring a photographer in Connecticut, the average cost is around $2,000 to $4,000. So sometimes people come to me and they're like, well, this is my budget. And I'm like, okay, great. Well, that's your budget, but that's not reality. It's like going to buy a Porsche and saying, well, my budget's $1,000. And the Porsche dealers are going to say, well, go down to the used car lot because you're not going to get a Porsche for $10,000. I mean, for $1,000. So that's what this video is about, to explain a little bit about these things. So when it comes to planning for your wedding, your most expensive thing is going to be your venue. So your biggest item is your venue. Now the next biggest item is usually your jewelry, between rings, wedding rings, and for the groom, wedding rings for the bride. That's usually your second highest ticket item. And your third highest ticket item is your photographer. And a lot of times when couples come to me, they put everything together. They're like, well, a piece of the pie is the florist, and a piece of the pie is the officiant, and the piece of the pie is the DJ, and therefore your pie should fit all the other pie pieces. But as you're going to learn today, that's not often the reality. And really, your photographer is third in line for one of the highest expenses of your wedding. So why is that? Now, there's a couple of reasons for that, and one of them is the time that the photographer spends with you on your wedding day. So let's have a typical wedding day. A typical wedding day for me, often I'm going to getting ready shots in the morning. I'm leaving the house sometimes at 7 a.m. I'm arriving at the bridal suite sometimes 9 in the morning. After getting ready shots of, let's say, the guys or the girls, then I go to the other place to do the other couple, do the getting ready shots there. Already I could be looking at 2 to 3 hours before anything even happened. Then I go to the ceremony. If we're looking at a Catholic ceremony, we could be looking at an hour. All in all, then we go to portraits, ceremony, and reception. So all in all, I could be spending 12 to 13 hours with you on your wedding day. Isn't that exciting? You get to spend like quality time together. But let's take a florist, for example. So a florist will come to your wedding. They drop off the flowers. They're there for 2 minutes, and then they leave. Okay? Let's take a justice of the peace or an officiant. They'll come to your wedding ceremony. Maybe it's a half an hour, maybe there for an hour. After that, they leave. And even your DJ. Sometimes I put in 6 hours shooting a wedding. I arrive at the reception hall and the DJ is just getting set up, and I've already been working 6 hours with you. So part of why a photographer costs more is because up front on your wedding day, they're putting in more hours and spending more time with you. So more hours translates into more time. Now the other thing is, when your wedding is over, most of your vendors, they're done. The DJ packs up his gear and he's finished. The florist, their day was done already at 9 in the morning when they dropped the flowers off. Your officiant's work is done after they left the ceremony. But for your photographer, I tell clients a lot of times, as much work as it is to shoot a wedding, my work begins like after the wedding is when the work really begins, because I'm looking at 30 to 40 hours of editing your photos. Okay? So people don't realize that. They say, well, how come you're charging me, $150 an hour or $200 or $300, whatever. They look at that fee and they go, wow, that's a high hourly rate. But that fee not only includes the shooting of your wedding day, which we could be looking at 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 hours. It also includes, 20 hours, 30 hours of editing your photos, and it includes getting ready for your wedding. So when we put all that time together, we're looking at, an easy 40 hours of work to prepare for a wedding, shoot a wedding, edit a wedding, upload your photos, get everything to you. We're looking at 40 hours of work. So once again, photographer charges more because they have to put a lot more work into, delivering for you, the finished product, which is your photos. And now we haven't even got into albums yet. That's another whole story. The other reason why wedding photography costs so much is because of equipment costs. So, okay, let's just say a justice of the peace. What type of equipment do they need to bring to a wedding? Maybe they might have an iPad or something like that, a tablet. But there's not a lot of equipment. I'm sure at home they have computers and things like that. But a photographer, their equipment costs are the highest, I would say, probably of any of your vendors. An example, if you want good photos, you have to have good camera gear. So good photos comes from good cameras and, of course, good skill as a photographer. But we're talking about good photos, good camera, and with good camera comes high prices. And that's the cost of being a photographer, is the equipment costs are astronomical. For an example, here's the camera. This is a full frame camera. It's a professional. Just one camera, professional, entry level, could be anywhere from $1,500 to $5,000 just for a camera body. Okay, we're not talking lenses. We're talking camera body. Okay, and generally when I go to a wedding, I shoot with 2 cameras, so we're already looking at $3,000-$4,000. Okay. A good lens for a full frame camera is going to cost you usually a minimum of $500 to $3,000 for a lens. That's just a camera and a lens. You want to have backup equipment, of course, so you could be looking at bringing 3 cameras to the wedding. I generally bring 3 to 4 cameras to a wedding, and then you're looking at having a variety of lenses. You don't just want one lens, but different lenses for different situations. So just in camera gear, you could be looking at tens of thousands of dollars. And that's great if you have to make the investment once in your life. But when you're shooting 2,000, 3,000 photos per wedding, believe it or not, you start wearing out shutters. You maybe get 2 to 3 years, if you're lucky, out of a camera before a shutter needs to be replaced. If you're using lenses and you're zooming in and out, lenses start to break. So your equipment doesn't last forever and it wears out. And the cost of fixing things, you send it in the Nikon to fix it, you're looking at $500, just to bring it in. So that's what makes wedding photography so expensive, is the cost of the equipment. Now, we didn't even get into lighting, and most of your photography you need when you're shooting a wedding. You need lighting of some sort. You need lighting for receptions. You need lighting if you're out in bright light. So you start adding light stands, you start adding strobes, you start adding flashes, and you start adding backups. And as you can see, you start talking tens and thousands of dollars to shoot weddings, and that equipment, breaks down, fails over time, and needs to get replaced. The other thing is there's the cost of equipment for shooting a wedding, but then there's the cost of equipment when you get back to the studio. See, so when I buy a computer, I just can't buy the one on sale because it's not powerful enough to be using Photoshop and to be using Lightroom and all these computer programs that are graphic intensive. You have to have, very high amounts of RAM and memory and all these things to be able to just work with images. So your computer costs are easily twice the cost of most people. And then you have to have monitors that are color calibrated and are true to displaying colors accurately and all that. Then you have to have backup hard drives for your clients so that if they call you a year later and say, I lost my USB drive and can you get me my photos, that you have to be able to say, yes, I can get you your photos because I invested in backup drives, for your gear. So now we're talking computer expenses, we're talking monitors, we're talking having to pay for Lightroom and Photoshop and all these programs. We have, software to design wedding albums. Then you have all your backups and hard drives and cloud expenses for cloud storage. So once again, huge amount of costs, much more, I would say, than probably any of your other vendors. The other thing is physical demands of the job. Like to be a justice of the peace, physically not so demanding. Let's say to be a DJ, you just, you stand there for long, hours. That's about the extent of it. There's some equipment to haul. But with a photographer, it's your physically very demanding job. And I would say the most demanding of any of your vendors. Because the photographer is on their feet sometimes 12 to 13 hours a day. I mean, when I shoot with 2 cameras and a harness. So I have cameras and lenses and flashes hanging from me all day. I'm moving light stands and lights and equipment, and you're walking up hills, upstairs, downstairs, jumping on walls, doing somersaults, all these things to capture your clients' memories, because everything's happening fast-paced and all over the place. So the stress of shooting 3,000 shots and the stress of lifting everything, one camera 5 pounds lifted 3,000 times, that even your body starts to break down and hurt and ache, and it limits certain photographers. Like Justice of the Peace can do one ceremony, then they can go do another one. They can do 3 in a day. But a photographer is very limited, that they can only do 1 wedding a day generally. And for myself, I just do 1 wedding a week, because to do doubles and triples, it's just over the top. Physically, it's over the top, mentally, and then the whole demands for, memory cards and backing up and recharging batteries and all these things. So a photographer can't shoot as much, or do as much events as a Justice of the Peace or as a DJ. A lot of times DJs will do 2-3 events in a weekend. So once again, they have to charge more because they can't do as many of them. Another expense that a photographer has is hiring help. Now, I generally shoot myself, and that can help keep my costs down, but not a lot of photographers do that or can do that or choose to. So you have to hire people now. So you have to hire an assistant to carry equipment and light gear and stands and things like that. A lot of photographers, or the trend in the industry, is everyone wants a second photographer and they want a third photographer, and it's like, come on. So what starts happening now is, okay, not only do you have to pay for one photographer, now you have to pay for another photographer. And a lot of photographers don't edit their own work. I mean, I personally still edit my own work, but a lot of photographers outsource their work or to an editor. So now you have to pay an editor. So it's not just that you're paying the photographer, but now the photographer has to pay an assistant. The photographer has to pay somebody to, second shoot, if there is a second shoot. They have to pay somebody to edit. So once again, the costs are going up. The more people you have to hire, then you may have assistants in your studio, and people that lay out albums for you, the people that do social media work. So once again, costs go up higher and higher. So, those are some of the things that lead a lot to be able to to run a business in photography and to be financially solvent. It's not like photographers want to charge people lots of money, but it's just for them to stay in business. That's just the cost of doing business. And to have insurance, and I have to have pay for my insurance to cover my equipment and to pay the taxes and all the expenses of running a business also, can be very high. But definitely the things that I mentioned: camera equipment cost, computer equipment cost, length of time working with you on your wedding, length of time to edit your photos. All these things make the cost of being a photographer a lot higher than a lot of your vendors, and that's why it costs more. So I hope that explains for you a little bit more and helps give you more of a realistic expectation of what costs are going to be. And the important thing is that your wedding is, one of the most important vendors. I mean, I think in many ways it is your most important vendor, because your photographer is going to hold the memory of everything. Okay, your cake is going to get eaten. As beautiful as it is, it gets eaten and is gone. And your flowers, as beautiful as they are, they don't last forever. Your music, over time, it fades, the venue. But your wedding photos hold and capture the memory of every single thing through your wedding. Your flowers, your dress, your guests, your venue. All those things are all maintained for a lifetime with your photography. And you could have a not so good event or venue, maybe not so nice venue, but a good photographer is going to make your venue look amazing. But if you hire a friend or somebody that's not very good, and I see sometimes people spend all this money on the most beautiful venues, and then they have their friends shoot their wedding. And shooting a wedding is the hardest form of photography. I mean, I went to photography school and I've done many, many forms of photography, and shooting weddings is the hardest because of the time constraints, because of all the lighting challenges, the inside, the outside, the needing to light everything up. And it's not something that you want your friend to do, or someone that just doesn't have that experience, because it's so critical an event in your life. So if you want to skimp on your wedding, there's ways you can cut back on decorations, there's ways you can skimp or cut back, but your photographer is not the place that you want to be cutting back on. So I hope this helps you a little bit more to understand about the behind the scenes of being a photographer and what it's like and the costs. And if you have any questions, you can always email me. I keep my pricing as low as I can, at the same time delivering really beautiful work. And I'm very, very competitive and very reasonable when you see what's out there in the photographic world. So I'm happy to work with you to make your, try to reach your budget, to make everything work for you and go over the top for you to have a beautiful wedding photography experience. So once again, my name is John Munno, the studio owner and photographer for John Munno Weddings in Southbury, Connecticut. So happy holidays, and wedding kickoff season will be coming soon, come January. So definitely, if you haven't booked your photographer yet, give me a call, and I'd love to help you and work with you. Thank you.